Hello, my good people. Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today, we're going to be working on a 2015 Mercedes-Benz C300. On the C300 behind me today, we're going to be covering the ignition coil and spark plug replacement service. Now, this is something we recommend you do every 50,000 miles, at least for the spark plugs. The ignition coils are usually going to last you a little bit longer. Our C300 is at 113,000 miles on what we presume is its original hardware. So we're going to go ahead and replace both the coils and the spark plugs. The engine equipped in the C300 is an M274. So if your Mercedes is equipped with the same drivetrain, this will be applicable to your model. But before we get started, let's talk a little bit about the parts we're going to be using today. We're going to be using our Delphi coils. These are OE for the Mercedes-Benz, as well as some NGK plugs, technically aftermarket for the model behind us. Now that we know what we're working with, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this job, you're going to need a torque wrench, a 3/8 drive ratchet, a 1/4 inch drive ratchet, a T30, a 14mm 12-point socket, a couple extensions, and a pick. I also recommend a set of pliers. These ignition coils tend to be seized onto the old spark plugs, especially if they are original components. Now we know what tools we're working with. Let's get started on this DIY. All right, baby, we are under the hood of the C300. We're going to start by removing our beauty cover. To do that, you're just simply going to lift it up. It's got 4 rubber grommets that kind of hold it in place. Set this to the side. And now we have a general overview of where we're going to be working. We have our 4 ignition coils right here. As you can see, there is a lot of crud on top of this engine and the surrounding area. So we're going to do the right thing. We're going to go ahead and vacuum everything up first. And then we'll start on removing our first ignition coil. And once we have that one coil out, we're going to do the same cleanup process on each cylinder, just in case there's more debris like this down there. So we'll blow it out. We'll hit it with some compressed air. Shop vac it, whatever you have, as long as you have one or the other, will definitely be better than doing nothing. So let me clean this up really quick and then we'll get started. With our area quickly cleaned up, we can start by removing our first ignition coil. You're going to need a T30. I'm using a T30 on a small extension on a 1/4 inch ratchet. I'm just going to go ahead, break these 2 free, and then remove them. With our 2 T30s removed, we now have a little play in the ignition coil. The idea is you want to go ahead and rotate it a little bit and undo your electrical connector. I'm using a small pick tool to pop out this gray tab. Once you have it released like that, you can use the same pick tool or you can use your finger to push down on the tab. That locks it into place and pull back at the same time. Now comes the fun part. Is pulling out these ignition coils. These are original on this car from what we were able to find, so they've been in here for 113,000 miles, and they're going to put up a fight to come out. Bear with me while I struggle to pull this out, and then we'll show you the next step. Look at the color difference of these 2 ends. You have your old coil and your new one. That was 100% due to come out. And you can see the new Delphi coils also have a little bit of what I presume is dielectric grease on them, so that the next time you go to do this, they come out a little bit easier. Another thing to note with these is they tend to break a lot as you pull them out, just due to the nature of their design. So you can see right here, the plastic completely failed. So if you're doing this at around the same time that we are, highly recommend replacing the ignition coils while you're at it. Just have them. Worst case scenario, you return them if you don't need them. With that done, let's grab our vacuum and some shop air and work on cleaning out these ports before we pull out the old plugs. We got our shop vac. We have some shop air. I'm just going to run the vac to hopefully pick up whatever may be down there. Hopefully nothing's down there, and get to it. I don't know if you were able to see that, but we had a ton of dust come up from that tube alone. That alone is enough to clog up the threads on the cylinder head where the spark plug sits. So you definitely want to clean that out for every single one. You're going to see us repeat the process on 2, 3, and 4. With that taken care of, let's grab our extension and our socket and pull out this old spark plug. We have our Beru socket on the end of our extension and a 3/8 ratchet. And there you have it. what we presume is a 100,000 mile spark plug that has not been changed since this car rolled off the factory floor. Not terrible. Actually, it looks pretty good, to be quite honest, other than the rust and the dirty threads. But let's get this off and let's get our new spark plug ready to rock. We have our new spark plug in our socket. Again, these are magnetic. It's awesome. We have a couple marks on our socket, and that's to basically show me where the electrode is facing on the spark plug when I install it into the cylinder head. The idea is that you want your electrode facing the injector within a 45-degree mark. So we're going to go ahead and install it, and as we torque it down, we're going to keep an eye on our paint marks to see which way our spark plug is pointing so that we can get it relatively close to the injector. Let's go ahead and pop it in. And then whenever I'm doing spark plugs, I like to back up the socket a couple turns and then start it by hand. So counterclockwise first, and then clockwise. That way you're making sure that it didn't accidentally start itself when you put it in, and you lessen the chance of cross-threading the threads. Once you've snug it up by hand, we're going to go ahead and torque it down to 23 Newton meters. And while we do that, we also want to make sure this is as straight as possible coming off the spark plug. I like to have one hand on that and one hand on the torque wrench. Beautiful. With that situated, we can take our coil and start that in. You'll note, you may have heard me say this in the beginning, but these already come pre-lubed, if you will, from the factory. But if these were dry, I would recommend, or if you're reusing your original coils, I would recommend just a little bit of dielectric grease on there. These are bolted down, so you don't have to worry about them popping out. While we have it loose like that, we're going to reconnect our connector. Hear that satisfying click. Press in the gray connector, or the gray lock, and now we can send this the whole way through. And once it's seated properly, it should stay in the right place. Now we can grab our two T30s and get those started. And we're just going to go ahead and snug them down. If you wanted to torque these back home, the torque spec for these are 10 Newton meters or 7 foot-pounds. We're just going to snug them up with the old calibrated wrist. Again, T30, 10 Newton meters or 7 foot-pounds. Sweet. Now we can move on to the next one. We're going to repeat the process, but before we do that, we're going to go ahead and remove a couple T30s that hold this module in place up top, just so that we can move it out of the way ever so slightly so we can have better access to the electrical connectors for number 3 and 4. So let's do that first, and then we'll continue on the rest of the coils and plugs. Pop off this line. One T30 on the passenger side. And we have 2 more on the driver's side. And we have number 3 up top. With that module freed up, we're going to continue onto cylinder 2. Again, 2 T30s. With that freed up, we can go ahead and lift up the coil a bit. Now I can go ahead and access the gray lock. And then push on the tab. Now we just have the fun part of pulling these out. As you saw, the first one was very tight. I assume the rest of these 3 are going to be just as tight. You have a little spot here to grab onto as you pull them out. So I'm going to try to leverage myself from here while I grab on top of the coil as well. This one broke in full, so just be mindful that they can break as they come out, especially if they're original. Luckily we're replacing these today, but if you plan on reusing yours, take a more careful approach. Grabbing some pliers to pull these out. For this one, I'm just taking my pick and reaching underneath the module here to release my gray clip, push on my tab, and then work on freeing up the electrical connector. Then we're gonna rip this last ignition coil out. We'll probably have to grab the pliers like we did on 2 and 3. Hopefully not though. I'm going to plug our electrical connector in first, if possible. Lock that bad boy into place. And then seat the coil pack all the way down. Grab our 2 T30s and wrap that side up. Now we're going to install our 3 T30s that hold down our module on top of the valve cover. Again, not a required step to remove it, but it makes life a little bit easier when you get to the electrical connectors on coil pack 3 and 4. We're just going to snug these up. These are going to follow the same torque specs as your ignition coils, should you decide to torque them down. And now all we have left to do is reinstall our beauty cover that's held on by these 4 rubber grommets on top of our engine. Use the oil cap to line it up. Beautiful. And there you have it, my good people, another DIY in the books. Overall, a pretty straightforward job on the M274 engine. And again, the only takeaway of this DIY is if you're not replacing your ignition coils, just be mindful they may be stuck on there. Otherwise, I highly advise replacing them. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave them in the comment box below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.